It had been a long year and a half. All I wanted was a break. A break from all this fucked up paranormal shit. A break from seeing my friends get hurt. Some time for these wounds to heal. I just wanted to catch my breath. To be normal for a little while. I wanted school to be my biggest stress. Not a serial killer or giant monster that moves around bales of hay. But I couldn't get a break. It seemed for a short time like maybe everything was going back to normal. I hadn't had anything break down my front door and try and stab me at least, but something was off. I could only remember parts of my dreams, which was odd for me. Every computer I used seemed to get corrupted. My phone, thankfully, still worked well enough for me to get my sweet internet fix. Everything was off, but I think it had been so long since I had normal that I forgot what it was like. I even started reading creepypastas again. It had been months since I could even think about them. I was afraid I would read one of them and suddenly a new monster would be after me. I realised it was a silly fear. Not every creepypasta could be real. I still skipped over a few of the stories that were labelled reality. Last thing I wanted was to find some YouTube video about Marana Mordigod Gleskov. Jess was also getting back to normal. Her mother was out of the hospital. She wasn't the same as before, but Jess was just happy that they were both alive. Everything in her life had gotten as close as it would be to normal. It was good. Even the weather started to get nicer. The days got longer, the nights got warmer, people were talking about bonfires and camping trips. There was one thing that bothered me though. One thing above everything else. I couldn't sleep well. I woke up drained. I would fall asleep and be awake again in a few hours. Sweat dripping down my face and my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't remember my dreams like I said, but I was sure they were not nice ones. After all, even if I didn't know what I dreamed, I still dreamt. I assumed PTSD, like what the veterans have when they get back from war. Stress caused by a terrible event leading into insomnia, which was common. Then everything nosedived. Honestly, I wish I could say it surprised me. It all happened one day at school. It was study hall and I was sitting in class. I rested my chin on my palms, my elbows propped on the cold wood of the library table. Jess was sitting on the table, her long legs crossed. Her skin was getting tanner now that it was spring, and she loved to show them off. She also hated how I was too tired to vocalise how nice they were. She draped a leg over my shoulder, my other shoulder feeling the press of her hand on it. She smiled at me. Her voice almost a whisper. I just shaved last night. My legs are nice and smooth. Go on, feel them. I looked up to her and blinked, dumbly. It took me a minute to realise what she said. I sighed and rubbed the bags under my eyes. I'm sure they are, Jess. I think I'll just lay my head down for a minute. She moved away from me, crossing her arms over her chest and huffing. Well, if that's how you're gonna be... I looked up to her ready to apologise, but I froze. What I saw was her face with blood pouring from her mouth and eyes. It was everywhere. All over her clothes and the desk, staining her legs. She gurgled out words in a jumble mess. I screamed, fell from my chair and hit my head against a bookshelf, knocking it over and sending a flurry of books onto the floor with me. Jess stood over me, her face normal and her soft hands on my cheeks. Jonah? Are you alright? What happened? Why did you scream? I looked around, dizzy and confused. Scream? What? I must have fallen asleep. I looked around the room, everything was blurry and unfocused. My head was killing me, and put my fingers to the back of my skull, feeling a warm wetness in my hair. When I looked back at Jess, she was a nightmarish figure from before, her neck bent in an awkward way, her arms backwards and rivering in the most terrifying way. I closed my eyes, turned my head away, then I felt a gentle shaking. I heard a voice calling my name. It sounded soft, friendly. When I looked, Jess was almost crying. She hugged me tight. Jonah, stop playing, I'm really scared. We need to get you to the nurse. I can go myself, I said, slowly standing from the pile of books. Jess bit her lip, unsure if I really could. I'll go with you, it's no trouble. Jess, I'm fine, it's just down the hall. I can stand, I can walk. She didn't protest as I left. Out in the hall, I saw a group of girls walk by. One of them looked at me. She had blood pouring from her face too. I jumped, my skin crawling. She kept walking, staring at me, and me staring at her. I heard a growling voice come from her red lips saying,
"He comes."
I started running down the hall, past the nurse's office. I knocked over a smaller boy, a freshman by the looks of it, and he dropped his books all over the tiles of the hall. I apologised, leaned down to grab one of the textbooks, but I stopped. He looked up at me and said in the most innocuous voice,
"He evokes the hive mind. He is the end and the beginning. He is coming."
"What did you say?" I asked, panic in my tone. "I said it's not a problem." He looked at me confused, his brow furrowed. "Hey man, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, shaking my head. I started walking down the hall, much slower now. I pushed open the door of the bathroom, stepping into the large white room. I went to the sink, putting my hands on the cold porcelain. I turned the knob, splashing cool water into my face. When I looked up into the mirror, I saw them. Hundreds of them. Thousands even, all staring at me. Grotesque, mutilated human forms, bleeding from their eyes and mouths, their bodies mangled and bent in impossible ways. I heard voices, thousands of them, all chanting,
"He comes, he comes, he comes."
I turned around to see the empty wall of the bathroom, painted the same blindingly bright white as the rest of the room. I shook it off and went to the door. When I touched the handle to pull it open, I felt something on my fingers. I let go, instinctively jerking my hand away. When I looked down, I saw a very thick cold red liquid on my fingers, almost like blood, but much thicker and much darker. Not to mention it was nearly freezing, and that's the last thing I remember. I woke up the next morning in my bed, my father sitting by my bedside. He was smiling warmly when I woke up. His voice was soothing and even. "Hey buddy, how you feeling? You had an incident in school. Your mother had to work, but the doctor said you needed to rest. He said you were hallucinating because of sleep deprivation. Do you see anything now?" I looked around my room. Everything looked normal enough, but something felt wrong. I couldn't place it. Maybe it was the air, or maybe the smell. I sat up in my bed trying to process it all. So it was all just a hallucination? A waking dream? None of that ever happened? I almost sighed in relief. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, smiling to my dad. "Of course I see you." I heard a voice coming from next to me. "Jonah? Who are you talking to?" I whipped my neck over to see Jess, her hands on the foot of my bed. "Jonah, no one is here but me, and I haven't said a word." "But my dad, he's sitting right there." "Jonah," my father's voice said, "are you okay? Do you see someone over there?" I looked back to him. My heart was pounding in my chest. I started gasping. "Dad, Jess is right over there. Stop messing with me." "Jonah, your father isn't here." "Jess is at school, buddy. He had to work. He asked me to look after you." "She's in school, but she said she'd drop by around 4, after classes get out." Jess put her hand on my shoulder. I was whipping my head back and forth to look at both of them. "Jess, why are you doing this to me? It's not cool. He's sitting right there." "Jonah, I told you Jess is at school." I grabbed my father's shoulder, shaking him. "Stop it, Dad! Stop!" There was a bang at my window. We all turned, and it slowly opened. I couldn't breathe. The grip on my shoulder was tight, anxious. I scooted back slowly from the window. I felt my heart sink, my chest go tight. Slowly, something dark started to slip in through my window. It was coming in like a liquid, slowly dripping down the wall, forming a body as it pooled in. Suddenly, my door swung open. I snapped my neck over to look. It was Jess, holding a glass of water. I looked back to my shoulder. No one was there. Back to where my father once was. Then back to the window, which sat closed. Jess walked over, handing me the glass. I took it and then only realised how dry my throat was. I started drinking the water. Jess explained how I hit my head hard and had a concussion. She said that I needed to rest, but not sleep. That made no sense to me. My eyes shifted from her to the glass as I drank it. I stopped mid-swallow, almost choking on the water. The glass slipped from my hands, shattering on my hardwood floor and spilling the water all over. Jess knelt down and started picking up the bigger pieces. Oh, don't worry, I'll clean this up. I'm sure you didn't mean to. Her voice trailed off when she looked at me. Jonah? I was looking at my index and middle finger. I ran my thumb across them slowly. There was a very dark red stain on my fingertips. I'm sure it's nothing, she said after I explained. You just banged your head and got some blood on you. No big deal. Yes, big deal, I said, still staring at the stain. I remember I touched this red stuff in the bathroom just before I blacked out. It isn't a coincidence. Everything I saw was real, even if you don't believe me. So, I'm a monster? Bleeding from my eyes and mouth? I paused, my eyes narrowing at her. How did you know that's what I saw? You were muttering about it. In your sleep, saying that I was bleeding from my face. I have never talked in my sleep. Well, you did. I looked around my room. That same feeling of wrongness at my surroundings. I stood slowly, carefully avoiding the glass shards on the floor. I took delicate steps to the window. I looked outside, the sky a pale blue. Not a cloud in sight. The sun was shining, the grass bright, the forest still. I opened the window and looked around. The smell of pollen was carried into my room. The forest was still. A light breeze washed over my face. The forest was still. The stench of blood came flooding in from the strong wind. The forest was still. The forest was still. All this wind and not a single branch in the forest moved. I heard a growl behind me and spun around. A large, dark creature stood where Jess was, a matted mane around its neck, a white, long mask on its face, sewn in the middle and with only one eye socket. It stood on all fours. It took a step closer to me. I looked back out the window. I contemplated jumping, but I saw something else. A pale, grey, human-like figure. It had no arms, a horrendous grin, and small black eyes. I turned back to the thing in my room. He was joined now by a tall, reddish-black figure. It was the same colour as the liquid I felt on the door back at school. Mouths opened from every part of its body. Thousands of voices shouted loudly from the figure. He comes. Who comes? I stammered, my body shaking. When I turned back, the grey figure was standing like a gargoyle on my windowsill. I jumped, screamed, and fell at the foot of the tall black figure. He looked down at me, and I looked up at him. The voices were hushed, everything in silent. Then, in the most distorted, vile voice I've ever heard, a voice that sounded like evil itself, I heard one word.
Salvo.